Merchant, Zhu County has a businessman's family. His brother's family is rich. His brother's family is poor. And the two families are separated by a wall. During Kangxi, one disaster year, his brother couldn't afford to be poor. One day, it was too late. My brother had not cooked yet. He was grunting from hunger and worried about walking. There was nothing he could do. His wife asked him to beg for his brother, and the merchant said, "It won't work. If my brother had pity on us, he would have helped us." His wife insisted he go, so the merchant let his son go. After a while, my son returned empty-handed. Mitsuya said, "How about that? Am I right?" The wife asked her son what the uncle had said, and the son said, "The uncle hesitated to look at his mother, who said to me, 'The brother has split up, the family eats, and nobody cares who else.'" The two businessmen had no life to speak of, so they had to sell their only dilapidated household goods and make a living by selling them in exchange for some leftovers. There were 3 or 4 rascals in the village, and I got a look at the rich man's house, climbed over the wall and entered the man in the middle of the night. The businessmen heard the sound, woke up from their sleep, banged on their faces and shouted. The neighbors were too mean to rescue anyone. Big businesses have no choice but to shout out for business. When the second merchant heard her sister-in-law call for help and wanted to go for it, her wife pulled him up and said loudly to her sister-in-law, "My brother has split up his family. If anyone is in trouble, they can't care for anyone." After a while, the robbers smashed open the door of the house, grabbed the businessmen and branded them with red-hot iron, and screamed horribly. Sheng said, "They're not sentimental, but how could anyone not save their brother after he was killed? He was leading his son over the wall." The merchant and his son were already known for their strong military skills, and the robbers fled for fear of enlisting the help of other neighbors. The second merchant saw the sister-in-law's legs were burned and was busy helping them to the bed. The second merchant gathered up the servants of the big merchant before going home. The big businessmen were tortured, but the money wasn't lost. The businessman told his wife, "Now that we can preserve our property, it's all thanks to our brother, and we should give him a share." His wife said, "If you had a good brother, you wouldn't be guilty of this." The big business kept quiet. The two businesses had no food left and were filled with the idea that his brother would return the favor with something. But after a long time, I didn't hear anything. The wife of the second merchant couldn't wait to ask her son to borrow food with his pocket, only to return with one. The merchant's wife was annoyed and angrily sent her son back. The merchant finally persuaded her. 2 more months later, the two merchants were too poor to survive. "There's really no way to make a living, so we should sell the house to my brother," the merchant said. "If he's afraid we'll leave him, he may not accept our property and find a way to help us. If it doesn't, you can survive it if you sell a dozen or so dollars." The wife thought it was the only way, so she let her son take the deed and go to the merchant. The businessman told his wife, "Even if his brother is unkind, he is also a sibling. If they leave, we'll be isolated. Let's return the deed and give them a little more time." His wife said, "No, he said he was going to blackmail us. If I believe him, I'll fall for him. Aren't people who don't have brothers dead? We've raised the yard walls enough to defend ourselves. If you take his deeds and he falls in love, you can expand our house." When the agreement is reached, the second merchant shall sign the deed of the house and pay the house money. Merchant had to move to a neighboring village. The village scoundrels heard that the merchant had left, and then came to rob the merchant again, grabbed the merchant and whipped him, and used up all the drugs. The merchants had to use all their gold and silver possessions for their lives. When the bandits leave, open the barn of the big merchant and greet the village's poor for whatever they want. The barn was empty in a second. The next day, the merchant heard about the incident and rushed to visit. But the merchant is in a coma and can't talk anymore. He opened his eyes and saw his brother. He had to scratch the mattress with his hands and died soon after. The businessmen went angrily to the prefect to complain. But the robbers had long since escaped and had not been caught. The food robbers were poor people in the village, and the state couldn't help them. The youngest son left by the merchant was only 5 years old. Since his family was poor, he often went to his uncle's house by himself and did not return for days. The wife of the second merchant treated the child with disdain, and the second merchant said, "The father of the child is unkind. What's wrong with the child? I bought some steamed bread on the street and sent the kids home. A few days later, I sneaked a bucket of rice to my sister-in-law to raise my son. That's it, keep them coming." A few more years later, the businesswoman sold her family's property, and the mother and son were able to make ends meet before the businessmen stopped helping them. Another year, a famine, and people starving to death could be seen all over the road. The second business has too many people to eat and can't take care of others. When his nephew was only 15 years old and too weak to do heavy work, the merchant asked him to set up a basket and sell shopping with his brothers. One evening, the businessmen dreamed that their brother was coming, and said, "I was confused by my wife's words and lost my sentimental feelings. My brother embarrassed me even more than he ever did. The house you sold me before is empty, so you can move in. There's money hidden in the cellar beneath the hay behind the house, so you can eat and eat it. Let my son follow you. That loquacious wife, I hate her the most. Just leave her alone." When the merchant awoke, he felt strange and rented the house back at a high price. "Once we checked in, we dug up 500 liang of silver behind the room. Since then, instead of doing small business, he and his nephew have opened a shop on the street." The nephew was very smart. The accounts were never wrong, and he was sincere. That is, he accessed little money, and he must tell his brother that the businessmen were very fond of him. One day, her nephew cries to order rice for her mother, and the wife of the businessman does not want it. The merchants offered their nephew some food each month for his filial piety. After a few years, the second merchants grew richer. Soon after, the businesswoman died of illness. The businessmen were also old and split the family with their nephew, who received half of the estate.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.